My daughter called me useless, while holding a key to the storage unit she used to clear out my house. My son laughed and said, "Don't worry, we'll FaceTime you from the party." That's when I realized they weren't just abandoning me, they were erasing me. So I booked a cruise, vanished for a week, and came back with a new will that made sure none of them saw a single dollar. You want to know what happened when I walked back into my living room and they thought I was gone for good? Good, because it gets worse. Before we start, please make sure to like this video and hit that subscribe button so you never miss a story like this, and also comment where you're watching from. Thanks. I was standing at the kitchen counter, peeling a sticker off a cantaloupe, when my daughter Marissa walked in with that look, the one she used to give me when she wanted something big, like a car or my credit card. But this time, Kevin was with her, and they weren't smiling. "Mom, we need to talk," Marissa said, and I laughed, thinking maybe it was about the surprise birthday I had been hoping they were planning for my 65th next week. I wiped my hands on a dish towel, sat down, and waited. Then Kevin said it, flat, cold, rehearsed. "We think it's time you move into assisted living. You're not managing like you used to." I blinked, confused. "What are you talking about?" I said. "I'm fine." And I was. I walked every morning, took my meds, cooked, cleaned, didn't forget anything important. But they had already made their decision. "You left the oven on twice," Marissa snapped. "You keep watching the same shows and forgetting what day it is." I laughed again, bitter this time. "You think that means I need a home?" Then I realized what this was about. Kevin glanced toward the hallway. "Look, we've talked to Aunt Vivian. She's helped a lot, and we've been thinking it's not fair for you to expect us to keep supporting you." That stopped me. Cold. Supporting me? I had raised them alone after their father died, paid for Kevin's tech school, let Marissa move back in 3 times after breakups. I bought groceries. I paid the mortgage. What support? "You want me out," I said. Marissa didn't deny it. She just folded her arms. "It's time. We found a place that takes Medicare, and it's only 20 minutes away. They have group bingo." My hands started shaking. "You're trying to dump me because you don't want to pay for my birthday dinner." Kevin flinched. Marissa looked at her nails. "It's not just that. We've been covering a lot, and you don't see it. Honestly, it's like you expect us to owe you forever." They didn't even know I'd been skipping my own doctor visits to pay for their grandkids' school clothes. I walked into the living room, dizzy, heart thudding, and that's when I noticed the bookshelf. Half the photo albums were gone. "Where's my stuff?" I asked. Kevin followed me in, acting casual. "We moved a few things to the storage unit. Thought it might help you start decluttering. It's easier when you don't have to do it all yourself." "You touched Dad's things?" I whispered. They'd taken the framed photo from our wedding, the one on the mantel. "It's all safe," he said. "We just wanted to help. And you know, we figured once you were settled in, it wouldn't matter." That's when the rage hit. "You're not doing this for me. You're doing this for her. Vivian put this in your heads, didn't she?" They looked away. I stepped forward. She hated me for keeping the house. She said it should have gone to her. I turned and grabbed my phone. They didn't even try to stop me. I opened our family group chat and scrolled. Texts I'd ignored for months, thinking they were just updates or memes. But now I read the words with fresh eyes. "Vivian, if you don't act soon, the house'll rot with her in it." Marissa, "Lumo, yeah. We'll throw a freedom party when she's finally in that home." Kevin, "Still need to get the title switched. Her signature's shaky anyway. Shouldn't be hard." I couldn't breathe. They'd been plotting this for months. I walked past them without a word, into the garage, needing air, space, escape. It was cold in there, dim, just the single overhead light buzzing. I pulled a box off the shelf labeled "Jeff's Stuff, My Husband's Things." And when I opened it, I saw a brochure from 1989, a cruise line. We'd dreamed about it but never went. He died before we could even book. I sat there on a folding chair, staring at that faded blue cover, waves and palm trees and the words, "It's never too late to go." Then my phone buzzed. Another text from Kevin. "We'll send a van next week to help pack up. Don't make this harder than it has to be." I looked at the brochure. I looked at the message, and I made a decision. I wouldn't pack. I wouldn't move. I wouldn't fight them. I'd leave, on my own terms. They were expecting a sobbing old woman clutching a casserole dish. Instead, I'd disappear for a week with no warning. And when I came back, everything would change. I stayed in the garage, long after the light shut off automatically, sitting on that cold folding chair with the cruise brochure still in my lap. I didn't even realize I'd been crying until I noticed the dampness on my neck and the paper in my hands starting to curl from moisture. "It's never too late to go," it said in gold script. My fingers traced the faded edges like they might unlock some hidden door, some version of my life that didn't end with my kids treating me like an expired carton of milk. I don't know what made me open the safe after all these years, but something told me to dig. Behind my husband's old tax files and a dusty cigar box full of coins, I found a yellow envelope marked "Legal, Jeff's original will." My heart stuttered. I'd forgotten it existed. Vivian had pushed us years ago to update everything after Jeff's passing, and I let her handle it like an idiot. She said she'd file the new version, take care of all the red tape. But as I opened the envelope and read the pages, I realized something. This wasn't the version she claimed was on record. This one listed me as sole owner of everything. No trust splits, no power of attorney granted to anyone. No mention of her. My breath caught. She never filed this one. She must have swapped it for her edited version, the one giving her access, in case of mental decline. I folded it gently and placed it inside a Ziploc bag, then slipped it into the tote I used for groceries. Just holding it made me feel like I had a matchbook in my hand, something that could burn down everything they'd tried to build behind my back. Still sitting in the garage, I opened Facebook and typed in two names I hadn't thought about in months: Denise Morgan and Patricia Crane. My best friends in high school. Denise was in Tampa now, divorced twice, and running a quilting supply store. Patricia lived in Fort Lauderdale and always posted corny memes about aging like wine. I messaged them both the same thing. "You guys still taking that cruise?" I didn't wait for answers. I pulled up the cruise line's website on my cracked tablet, the same one Kevin always mocked, and started browsing dates. One popped out at me, leaving in 3 days from Miami. 7 nights, all inclusive, with a special midweek gala for life milestones. That was it. That was where I'd be on my 65th birthday. Not in a dusty nursing home with strangers and tapioca pudding. I entered my credit card info and booked it. It felt reckless and strange, like I was cheating on my life. When the confirmation hit my inbox, I felt a jolt in my chest. Then I heard the creak of the door behind me. Marissa poked her head into the garage. "What are you doing out here? It's freezing." I slipped the envelope deeper into the tote. "Just getting some old photos. Wanted to look through them before you toss everything." She rolled her eyes. "No one's tossing anything." "God, you're so dramatic." Then she turned and left, flipping the light switch as she went. I sat there in the dark and smiled for the first time in days. The next morning I packed light, just one suitcase and the envelope tucked inside. A shoe in the bottom. I told them I was visiting a friend in Naples for the week, which they didn't question. They assumed I'd be gone anyway soon, so what did it matter where? I booked a cheap Greyhound to Miami and deleted my location from the family tracking app Kevin had installed for safety. At the bus terminal, I got a message from Denise. "Yes! We're boarding same ship. You coming?" And then one from Patricia. "You're gonna love this. Spa, wine, no judgment." I smiled so wide my face hurt. They didn't ask why. They didn't need to. That night, I stayed in a roadside motel, ate vending machine crackers for dinner, and for the first time in what felt like years, I didn't feel invisible. I wasn't sure what would happen next, or how I'd come back from this, but I knew I'd rather be floating in the middle of the ocean than drowning in my own house while the people I raised measured the curtains for their inheritance. I was done waiting to be rescued. I was going to start rescuing myself. By the time I stepped onto the cruise ship, I could already feel the weight of Ohio peeling off my shoulders like an old coat. The air smelled like salt and pineapple and freedom. Denise spotted me first, yelling my name across the terminal like we were still 17 and sneaking out of civics class. Patricia followed right behind her, pulling a giant floral suitcase and crying before we even hugged. "You look like hell," Denise said, grinning. Perfect timing. I didn't tell them everything. Not yet, just said my kids had pulled some things, and I needed a break. Denise didn't press. She never did. That night, we dressed up and went to the adults-only lounge where a cover band played Fleetwood Mac songs slightly off-key, but no one cared. I had 1 glass of wine, then 2, and by the time the 3rd came, I could feel the numbness starting to melt. That's when I met him, Mason. He was wiping down the bar with that practiced motion that said he'd done this 1,000 times, but there was something different in his face. Not flirty, not fake, real. He looked me straight in the eye when I ordered, "Cabernet, please." "Rough day?" he asked, tilting his head. "Rough decade," I said before I could stop myself. He smiled but didn't laugh. "Then it's on the house, just this one." I studied him. Late 30s or maybe early 40s, black polo shirt, wedding ring tan line, and tired eyes. I took a sip and said, "What makes you generous to strangers?" He shrugged. "My mom would have been about your age. She always told me to pay attention to people who sit quiet in loud rooms." That sentence punched me in the ribs. "Would have been?" I asked. He nodded, wiped the same spot on the bar twice. "Died a few years ago. Dementia. My brother bailed. I was the one who moved her in, stayed overnight, bathed her when the nurse canceled." "I'm sorry," I said, meaning it. He nodded, then walked off to help another couple arguing about tip percentages. I didn't know why, but something in me cracked a little right there. Not in a sad way, just in a way that made me realize I hadn't talked to anyone like that in years. Denise and Patricia danced to Dreams, dragging me with them until my knees ached, and we laughed like we were back in prom dresses at the Knights of Columbus Hall. When we got back to our cabins, Denise leaned against my doorframe. "You gonna tell us what really happened, Deb?" she asked, soft now. I looked down at my shoes. "They're trying to put me in a home. Said I'm a burden. Said I forgot to turn off the oven twice, and now I don't deserve to live in my own house." Denise didn't say anything for a second, then, "We'll kill 'em." Patricia from her room, "We'll poison their smoothies." I laughed harder than I should have, and maybe cried a little too. Inside my room, I stared out at the water, holding that wine glass Mason gave me, empty now, but still heavy in my hand. My phone buzzed. I picked it up and saw a message from Marissa. No words, just a video. I played it. It was her and Kevin, clearly tipsy, toasting with champagne in what looked like my living room. "Happy 65th, Mom. Hope you're enjoying your freedom. Don't get lost at sea, LOL." She said it with a smirk I didn't recognize. Kevin raised his glass. "Here's to finally living life without the guilt trip." I stood there, frozen. Behind them, I saw my bookshelf, stripped. The family photo wall, gone. My house, my things, and they were celebrating. I turned the phone off, sat on the edge of the bed. Then I stood up, walked to the tiny desk, and pulled out the envelope with Jeff's real will. I set it down. Then, I opened my laptop and started typing a list. Not a to-do list, a war map. I needed a lawyer. I needed to check what paperwork Vivian had filed. I needed witnesses. And I needed to make sure my children never touched a single cent of what I left behind. I wasn't just on this cruise to breathe. I was here to plan. And when I came back, I'd do more than just exist. I'd erase every lie they'd told about me, one document at a time. The next morning, I woke up early, before the breakfast buffet even opened, and took a walk alone on the upper deck, letting the wind smack against my face like a reset button. I didn't sleep much after watching that video from Marissa and Kevin. Their smug little toast kept replaying in my head, not because it hurt, though it did, but because it confirmed everything I was starting to realize. They didn't just want me out of their lives. They wanted my house, my money, the things I'd built with Jeff and protected for decades. And they were willing to smile while doing it. After I grabbed a banana and coffee, I found myself back. In the lounge from the night before, but this time it was quiet, just a few early risers playing trivia at the bar. Mason waved as I sat down, but I didn't feel like talking, so I nodded politely and picked the booth in the corner. That's when she walked in. Short gray hair, navy blazer, not a tourist. She looked like someone who sat on non-profit boards and corrected people's grammar at dinner. She ordered black tea and sat alone with a crossword puzzle, pen in one hand, glasses in the other. There was something about her, calm but alert. She reminded me of my old principal from the school where I worked, the kind of woman who could end a fistfight with just a look. I don't know what made me speak. Maybe the silence was too loud, but I leaned over and said, I never know what 9-letter word means betrayal until recently. She raised an eyebrow, glanced at me, and said, treacherous? I smiled. That'll work. We got to talking. Her name was Margaret Hall. She used to be an estate attorney in Baltimore, specialized in family inheritance disputes, and retired 2 years ago after her husband passed. She was on the cruise alone, too. When I told her my kids were trying to put me in assisted living against my will, she didn't flinch. Let me guess, she said. They're saying you're confused, forgetful, emotionally unstable? Something like that, I said. And they've moved things out of your home? Yes. And there's another relative, someone, pushy, maybe with old legal connections, helping them? My stomach turned. My sister, I said. Vivian. She's been bitter ever since I got the house. Margaret sipped her tea. Sounds like elder coercion mixed with preemptive inheritance manipulation. Common, ugly, often hard to fight unless you act early. Do you still have your husband's original will? I stared at her like she'd read my mind. I do, I said. Found it in a safe 2 nights ago. She leaned in. Have you checked your county's deed office recently? If your sister forged or updated anything behind your back, they could be building a legal narrative that you've already stepped down. I hadn't even thought of that. They posted my house on Zillow yesterday, I said. I got a listing. Link while I was mid-ocean. Margaret whistled. Then you're on a clock. They may have used power of attorney to move the title. Do you have anyone local who can verify documents for you while you're here? A neighbor, maybe, I said. But I don't know what she could find. Give me her number, Margaret said. I'll walk her through what to ask. If she can pull your current deed online, we'll know if your sister filed anything shady. I hesitated, then handed her my phone. She called Tina, explained what we needed, and within 20 minutes, we had a screenshot showing something I'd feared but couldn't believe. Vivian's name was listed as a trustee. Not owner, not buyer, trustee. Which meant she'd filed a legal document placing my house in a family trust, likely claiming I was incompetent or needed oversight. My throat went dry. She has no right, I whispered. Margaret didn't look surprised. Of course she doesn't. But rights don't matter when the paperwork looks real. You need to file a new will, one that explicitly states your wishes, overrides any prior ones, and explains your mental competence in detail. If they challenge it later, the court will see your video, your handwriting, your friends. There'll be no doubt you knew exactly what you were doing. I nodded, numb but focused. Can we do that from here? She smiled. I don't go anywhere without a notary stamp. You'd be surprised how many people try to die quietly on vacation. That afternoon, in Margaret's cabin, with Denise and Patricia sitting nearby and Mason popping in to witness the signing, I recorded a full statement explaining everything. What my kids had done, how Vivian manipulated them, and how I was cutting them out of my will, not out of spite, but out of protection for what Jeff and I built. I signed the new document with a shaky hand but a clear head. Then Margaret handed me a USB drive with the video on it and said, "Keep this close. And when you get home, don't tell them anything. Let them think you're still confused. Let them keep playing the game. Then pull the rug." As I left her cabin, something shifted in my chest. I wasn't scared anymore. I wasn't sad either. I was waiting, planning, preparing, because for the first time in years, I wasn't just the mother they pitied. I was the woman who would bury them in their own lies. The next morning started quiet, almost too quiet, like the sea itself was holding its breath with me. I was sitting on a deck chair watching the horizon stretch out like a promise when my phone buzzed in my lap. I figured it was one of the girls, sending another meme or a photo from breakfast. But when I unlocked it, what I saw made my blood freeze. It was a notification from Zillow. Someone had updated the listing for my house. Not a random property. My actual address. I clicked the link and stared at the screen as a fresh batch of photos loaded. My living room, my kitchen, even the backyard with the garden Jeff and I built from scratch the summer before he got sick. New listing. Must see, it read. My name wasn't anywhere on the seller contact info. Just some realtor I'd never heard of and a price tag that screamed desperation, like they were trying to offload it fast before I got home. My hands were shaking as I hit call on Tina, my neighbor back in Ohio. She answered on the third ring, out of breath. "Deb, I was gonna call you last night. Your daughter and some guy were in your house again. He was measuring the windows." "What?" I said, my voice sharp. "You sure?" "Positive. She said they were preparing for staging. Didn't look like you were there by choice." I didn't want to cause a scene, but something felt wrong. "No," I said, already opening the group chat with Margaret, Denise, and Patricia. I dropped the Zillow link, took screenshots of the listing, and then texted Mason separately. I didn't even know why I messaged him. I just needed someone with a steady voice. He replied instantly. "You okay?" "No," I typed, "but I will be." Margaret called me 5 minutes later. "This isn't just shady. It's illegal. Unless they have forged documents. If your name is still on the deed, and it is, any attempt to sell it without your consent is fraud. They've already taken pictures, changed the locks, rearranged everything," I said, pacing my cabin. "They've acted like I'm gone." "Good," she said, her voice calm like always. "Let them think that. We'll use their arrogance, but we'll need to prepare a fraud notice and send it to your county office the moment you get back. Until then, make sure no one knows what you've done legally. Play small. Pretend to be clueless." I sat down on the bed and stared at the listing again. The coffee table was gone. My rocking chair, too. They hadn't just tried to sell my home. They'd erased me from it. "They think I'm a ghost," I whispered. "Then let's haunt them," Margaret said. "And when the time comes, we'll show the court exactly who tried to bury you." That night, the ship threw a formal dinner to celebrate milestone. Birthdays, and I stood between Denise and Patricia in a borrowed dress I hadn't worn since Jeff's funeral. When they called my name and brought out a cake, I smiled for the cameras, but inside I was somewhere else, already back home, already waiting in the hallway when Marissa walked in, already watching her face collapse when she realized I'd never really been gone. Mason passed by our table and gave me a small nod, like he could see straight through the smile and into the steel I was hiding underneath. Later, back in my room, I copied the will documents onto a second USB drive and tucked it into the lining of my suitcase. Then I deleted the Zillow app, turned off my phone, and stared out the window at the black water stretching into nothing. They wanted me gone. They were selling my life piece by piece. But I was coming home, and when I did, I'd show them what happens when you try to erase a woman who remembers everything. I stepped into the house 2 days later, with my keys still in hand, and the kind of silence that doesn't feel like peace, but like something has been stolen. The air inside didn't even smell like home anymore. It was cleaner, like chemically scrubbed, the scent of lemon cleaner trying to cover something up. I dropped my bag at the doorway and stood there for a full minute, just staring into the living room. It was gutted. My rocking chair was gone. The big family photo that had hung over the mantel since Jeff's funeral was missing. The rug we bought on our 30th anniversary had been rolled up or replaced. There was just cold laminate floor now, so polished it looked like a showroom. I walked in, slowly, like I wasn't sure if I was allowed. The couch was still there, but the pillows were gone. Half the bookshelf was empty. I went to the hallway closet. My winter coat was missing, my old boots gone. Then the kitchen, new toaster, new soap, no coffee mug in the sink, no dish towel hanging by the stove. Like no one lived here at all. Or rather, like someone else did. I checked the fridge. It was nearly empty except for a 6-pack of sparkling water I never bought and a package of almond milk I couldn't drink. I pulled out my phone and started recording. Every room, every missing photo, every stolen item, every drawer with nothing inside. I was narrating under my breath as I filmed it, documenting it like a crime scene. Because that's what this was. A slow burglary carried out by people who didn't wear masks because they were related to me. As I turned back to the living room, the front door opened and Kevin walked in like he owned the place. He froze when he saw me standing there, holding my phone. "Mom," he said, voice caught between surprise and guilt. "You're back." "I wasn't supposed to be?" I asked. He looked behind him, probably hoping Marissa wasn't far off. "We thought you were still in Florida," he mumbled. "You said you'd be at Denise's for the week. And that meant you could start staging the house?" I asked, tilting my head. "Without my name on the contract? Without my permission?" He didn't answer. just shifted awkwardly. Vivian said the trust was active, that you were stepping down. I laughed, but it wasn't funny. Is that what she told you? That I'm senile? That I've legally removed myself from my own life? His face tightened. Look, Marissa handled most of the paperwork. I just saved the Zillow link, I said, cutting him off. Thanks for that, by the way. Real smooth. I walked to the mantel where the photo used to be and pointed. Tell me where it is. My wedding photo. My grandmother's quilt. The letters from Jeff. We didn't throw anything out, he said quickly. They're in storage. Marissa thought we should clear space before I got locked. Up in some group home? I snapped. Before the ink dried on your forged documents? He stepped forward, suddenly defensive. You're overreacting. Vivian showed us everything. She said you were confused, you'd lost track of your meds, you were endangering yourself. I have a will, I said, my voice low now. A new one, with video evidence, with legal witnesses, filed and notarized. It invalidates anything she touched. You want to keep talking about confusion? Let's do it in front of a judge. He stared at me, stunned. You recorded a new will? On the cruise, I said, with a retired estate attorney, with 2 witnesses, and with a full list of every item removed from this house. The silence stretched between us. I could see his brain racing, realizing just how badly they'd screwed up. That's when the door opened again. Marissa walked in with a purse full of keys and a giant Starbucks, smiling like she'd just closed on a condo. Then she saw me. What the hell? She said, stopping dead. You're not supposed to be here. Clearly, I said. You sold me a ticket out and thought I'd never come back. She glanced at Kevin, who was uselessly staring at the floor. We had a plan, she hissed. You agreed to rest in Florida, to think about your future. You mean while you cleaned out my past? I said. While you deleted every sign that I existed in this house? She stepped forward, angry now. You can't just waltz back in and undo everything. I raised my phone. Actually, I can. And I am. And I've already started. Her face went pale. I looked between them and said one final thing before walking down the hall to my bedroom, where I hoped at least my nightstand hadn't been ransacked. You both better call Vivian, because this game, it's over. And next time we talk, it won't be in this house. It'll be in court. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was scared, but because my mind wouldn't stop replaying every word, every fake smile, every little act of quiet betrayal that led to this moment. They had cleared out my home while I was alive and breathing, made decisions about my life like I was already buried, and now they had the audacity to look shocked when I walked through my own front door. I laid in bed with the door locked, the USB drive with my video tucked into the pocket of my robe, and a notebook beside me with every name, date, and receipt I could remember. At 6:30 in the morning, I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and texted Vivian. We need to talk. Today. She replied within minutes. Fine. I'll stop by after lunch. No apology, no hesitation, just like always, assuming she was still the one calling the shots. Around noon, I changed into the blue cardigan Jeff liked. Something about it always made me feel grounded. And I laid out copies of everything. The real will, Margaret's notarized statements, screenshots of the Zillow listing, even the group, chat texts I'd printed the night before. I didn't want to fight. I wanted silence. I wanted her to look me in the eye and realize the empire she thought she was building was made of wet cardboard. When she showed up, she didn't knock. She just walked in like it was still 1998 and she was dropping by for a cup of sugar, wearing her usual silk scarf and too much perfume. Well, she said, scanning the living room, you've made quite the mess of things. I didn't move. Sit down. She raised an eyebrow. Excuse me? I said sit, I repeated, my voice like stone. You're not walking through this house until we finish. She scoffed but obeyed. I'm assuming this is about your performance the other night? Performance? I laughed. Vivian, you falsified a trust document, encouraged my children to break into my house, and attempted to sell my home while I was on a boat. That's not a misunderstanding. That's criminal fraud. She tilted her head. Oh, Deborah, don't be dramatic. I simply guided them. The will you had was old. You were clearly struggling. I thought I was helping. Helping yourself, I snapped. You couldn't stand that Jeff left me the house. You've hated me since the funeral. And now you think because I'm over 60 and don't post selfies, I'm too stupid to notice you rewriting my life." Her face twitched, just a flicker, but enough. "The kids asked for my help," she said. "They were scared. You left the stove on. You repeated stories. They weren't sure you could manage." I slid the documents across the table. "That's the original will. That's the notarized update. And that's a certified letter from a retired estate lawyer who will testify in court that I was lucid, logical, and fully aware when I revoked every power you thought you had." Vivian's hand hovered over the papers but didn't touch them. "You're bluffing." "Try me," I said. "You think this is about revenge. It's not. It's about boundaries. It's about consequences. You had my children sneaking into my house and selling my furniture, and you told them I'd never fight back." She stood up, hands shaking. "You're going to regret this." "No," I said, rising to match her. "You are. Because I've sent copies of these documents to 3 different lawyers, and I've recorded this entire conversation, including what you just said." Her eyes widened. "What?" "There's a camera in the corner, right under the clock." She turned, saw the blinking light, and for the first time since I'd known her, she looked scared. "You wouldn't." "Already did," I said. "And tomorrow, if you don't call that realtor and pull the listing, I'll send this recording to the local press and the county court. Elder fraud is a felony in this state, Vivian. You don't get to play puppet master anymore." She opened her mouth, then closed it. For a moment, she looked like a child caught lying about breaking a vase, and I realized something. She wasn't powerful. She was just practiced, and I had finally stopped playing the part she cast me in. She turned and walked out without another word. No door slam, no insult, no attempt to regain control, just silence. When the door clicked shut behind her, I sat back down and let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding since Florida. I texted Margaret, "Vivian's out. Next step?" The reply came fast. "Prepare for court. You just won the first battle. Now let's finish the war." The courthouse was colder than I expected, not just in temperature but in atmosphere. Like every echo down the marble hallway was meant to remind you who had power and who didn't. Margaret met me outside with a tight smile and a manila folder, full of everything we'd prepared over the past 10 days. My new will, the video recording, the forged trust paperwork, the Zillow listing, the group texts, even the notarized timeline we drafted on the cruise. She looked like a lawyer again, not a retiree on vacation. "You ready for this?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. "They're not going to hold back." "Neither am I," I said. We walked inside together, passing Kevin on the bench with his tie too loose and his hands shaking like a boy waiting outside the principal's office. Marissa stood across the room in a bright blazer that didn't match her shoes, clutching a folder of her own. Vivian was nowhere to be seen. Coward. When the bailiff called my name, we stepped into the small probate courtroom where everything felt intimate and too public at the same time. The judge was a middle-aged woman with sharp glasses and no patience for drama. Marissa's lawyer started with the usual nonsense, that I was not of sound mind, that I had been manipulated by outsiders, that my new will was coerced and invalid. I didn't flinch. Margaret didn't even blink. "Your Honor," she said as she stood, "I'd like to introduce evidence confirming Ms. Kessler's full cognitive clarity during the drafting of her new will. Recorded on video, in her own words, with 2 legal witnesses and a date-stamped filing submitted prior to any trust interference by her sister or heirs." The judge nodded. "Proceed." Margaret played the video. There I was on screen, sitting in that cruise cabin, speaking clearly, confidently, stating every name, every reason, every betrayal. The room was silent except for the audio. When I finished the statement on camera, ending with, "I am doing this not from anger, but protection," I looked up and saw Kevin with tears in his eyes. He couldn't even look at me. Marissa rolled her eyes like she still thought this was a game. Then came the photos. My stripped home, the listing screenshots, Tina's affidavit describing unauthorized entry. Finally, Margaret pulled out the forged trust paperwork and laid it on the judge's desk. This was submitted by Ms. Vivian Wells without Ms. Kessler's knowledge or consent. filed in an attempt to take control of the property and assets of a legally competent individual. The judge adjusted her glasses, read the signatures, and looked up at Marissa's lawyer. "Do you have any rebuttal evidence?" he stammered. "Just verbal testimony, Your Honor." "Verbal testimony doesn't undo forged legal documents," she snapped. "This is serious." Then she turned to me. "Ms. Kessler, do you have anything to say before I rule?" I stood slowly, every muscle in my legs stiff with fear and fury and exhaustion. "Your Honor," I said, "my children didn't just try to erase me from my own life. They made plans based on my death while I was still breathing. They took what wasn't theirs, laughed about it, toasted it. I'm not here to punish them. I'm here to protect what my husband and I built and make sure the next woman they try this on sees the warning signs before it's too late." The judge nodded once, then spoke without hesitation. "The court finds the updated will valid and enforceable. The forged trust is hereby voided. All powers of attorney previously filed are revoked. Control of the estate returns solely to Ms. Kessler, effective immediately. I am also referring Ms. Wells for investigation into potential elder fraud." Marissa gasped like a fish out of water. Kevin dropped his face into his hands. Margaret squeezed my arm. The gavel came down hard, and just like that, it was over. Outside the courtroom, Kevin approached me slowly, hesitantly, his eyes rimmed red. "I didn't know she forged anything," he whispered. "I thought we were helping." "Helping yourself," I said. "You stood by and watched them strip my life for parts." He didn't argue, just nodded and walked away. Marissa didn't say a word. She just stormed off, heels clacking down the tile like the sound of a door slamming behind her. I turned to Margaret, who was already packing up her folder. "You didn't just save my house," I told her. "You saved me." "You did that yourself," she said. "I just handed you the matches." That night, I sat in my untouched bedroom and lit the candle Jeff gave me for our last anniversary. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just watched. The flame dance in the dark, finally still, finally safe. And tomorrow, I'd decide what came next. It had been 5 days since the court ruling, and I hadn't heard a word from Marissa. Not a call, not a text, not even a half-hearted insult hidden behind fake concern. That didn't surprise me. But Kevin sent a letter, not an email, not a message, an actual handwritten letter folded neatly into a cream envelope and left in my mailbox like we were back in 1984. I found it while pulling weeds near the walkway, still trying to undo the mess they left behind, and I knew his handwriting immediately. For a moment I just stared at it, debating whether to throw it in the trash unopened, but curiosity got the better of me. I sat on the porch steps, peeled it open, and read. It wasn't long. He wrote that he was sorry, that he'd filed for divorce, that he'd been too weak to stand up to Vivian and Marissa when it counted. He said watching that video of me in court made him realize how far he'd let himself fall, how easily he'd chosen silence over loyalty, and that if I never wanted to speak to him again, he'd understand. There was a phone number at the bottom, and one line that said, "If you ever decide to call, I'll answer." I didn't cry. I didn't feel relieved. I just felt tired. That kind of betrayal doesn't vanish because someone gets a wave of guilt after the damage is already done. But the fact that he chose to put pen to paper meant something. He didn't try to spin it. He didn't ask for anything. He just admitted the truth. 2 days later, I called him from a payphone outside the diner we used to go to after church, when he was little. He answered on the second ring, breathless, like he hadn't stopped hoping. I told him to meet me there in 30 minutes, and when I walked in, he was already sitting at the back booth with 2 mugs of coffee waiting. I didn't hug him. I didn't sit across from him either. I slid in beside him, like I used to when he was 6 and afraid of thunderstorms. He looked older than I remembered, like the shame had aged him overnight. "You look tired," I said. He nodded. "Haven't slept much." We didn't speak for a minute. Then he said, "Mom, I held up a hand. "No speeches. I've heard enough words in court to last me a year." He nodded again. "Fair. So what now?" I asked. "You trying to make things right, or just trying to sleep at night?" He looked down. "Both." "And your kids?" I asked. "Do they know what you did?" "They know," he said. "Told them I messed up, that their grandma isn't going anywhere unless she damn well chooses to." I looked out the window. The same parking lot, the same gas station across the street. But the kid sitting next to me was gone, and this man was someone I didn't recognize yet. "You want forgiveness," I said finally. "That's not something I can hand out like coupons. You want a relationship, you're going to have to build it from the ground up. No shortcuts, no guilt trips, just time and proof." "I'll take it," he said quietly, "even if it takes the rest of my life." I nodded once, then slid the untouched coffee toward him and stood up. "Then I guess we'll see." Outside, the air was warm and thick with summer, and I walked home with my hands in my pockets, not thinking about what had been taken, but what was finally back in my control. That night, I pulled out the foundation paperwork, the Kessler Legacy Fund. It had started as an idea on the cruise, something to protect people like me from being erased. But now it was real. I'd met with the bank, opened the accounts, assigned Margaret as legal advisor. The first donation came from the sale of some collectibles Jeff had hidden away in a storage locker I found after the court case. The second came from a publisher who'd heard about the case and wanted to reprint my court testimony as part of an elder rights campaign. The fund would offer legal support for seniors facing financial manipulation from their own families. Free consultations, real defense, a voice when the world tried to treat them like luggage instead of people. I signed the final form, sealed the envelope, and walked it to the mailbox myself. When I slid it in, I didn't feel righteous. I felt steady, like I was standing on new ground, like my story was no longer theirs to twist. It was mine, and now it would be used to protect others from ever living what I just survived. 1 year later, I stood at the same cruise terminal where it all began, only this time I wasn't hiding. I wasn't running or licking wounds or pretending to be okay while strangers danced around me. I was invited this time, as a guest speaker, for the National Elder Rights Summit hosted on board, a gathering of people who knew exactly what it meant to be betrayed by your own blood. I had my boarding pass in one hand and the welcome packet in the other, and when I looked up to see Denise waving from the second-floor balcony with Patricia beside her in a giant sun hat, I smiled without faking it. I still lived in the same house, but it didn't feel like a grave anymore. I'd painted the walls, bought a new rug, replaced the couch, and rehung only the photos that made me feel strong. The others, wedding pictures, baby portraits, reminders of people who no longer showed up, I packed them in a box and gave them a shelf in the garage. Not out of hatred, just clarity. When Mason saw me coming up the ramp, he was behind the bar, same black polo, same easy smile. He gave me a wink and a glass of cranberry juice with no words, and I tapped the rim like a toast. "Still working?" I asked. "Still listening," he said. I found my room, unpacked just enough to not look like a runaway, and slipped into the same cardigan I wore the day Vivian lost everything. That afternoon, I stood in front of a crowd of about 200 people, seniors, social workers, lawyers, advocates, and told them what it felt like to be discarded like furniture, to be robbed of dignity by people who hugged you as they did. I told them about the cruise, the will, the court. I didn't cry until I said the words, and I came back stronger than when I left. The applause didn't feel like praise. It felt like release. That night there was a gala on the top deck. Patricia danced with a man who swore he used to sing backup for Barry Manilow. Denise was arguing with a waiter about the quality of the shrimp. I stood at the railing, watching the moon smear across the ocean like a brushstroke, and I thought about Jeff. I wondered what he would have said if he saw me now, whole, steady, not angry but sure, not grieving, just aware. I wasn't trying to get back what I lost. I was living what I had earned. I felt my phone buzz in my pocket. A text from Kevin, just one sentence. I got a job helping seniors apply for housing. I stared at it for a long time, then typed, "Good. Stay with it." I didn't add anything more. I didn't need to. I slid the phone back into my pocket and leaned against the rail, letting the sea air hit my face. The ship started to move, slow at first, then stronger, cutting through the water like it knew exactly where to go. Behind me were people who tried to erase me. Ahead of me was a life built with both hands and no permission. I didn't look back, not even once.